Hey guys, Hollow1 here, welcome back to another video, and today we are here with my LEGO PRR M1a mountain type steam locomotive, and I'm going to do a full review on this thing, because it's been so long since I've done an update on it, that I actually have no clue what you guys know about this thing, so figured it's probably better to just start over. So this thing's kind of been an ongoing project for the past like 2 years. It started out with its very humble beginnings back on my YouTube channel, again, 2 years ago. If you want to go back and watch that video, you can. I don't suggest it, because it's horrible and the engine looks really, really bad. But I was so excited that I had built it that I made a video on it. Here I am 2 years later with a much better looking locomotive, now massively regretting the fact that I ever made that video. So for those of you that just stopped the video, went back, found my old video, watched that, and are now back here, yes, this is in fact the same locomotive. Believe it or not, it looks a lot different. I did try and do updates with it as I built more and more of this locomotive, but I wasn't very good at it, and I just started building things, and I kind of forgot what I had added to it, so I would go back and watch the update videos and try and remember, and sometimes I got everything, and sometimes I didn't. So, yeah, that's why I'm starting over again. So, a little fun fact, part of my inspiration for coming back and doing a full review on this locomotive is because the first review I did on this locomotive was the first video I ever put on YouTube with, like, a proper thumbnail. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, and you've been looking back on older videos for some reason, and some of the more recent ones, actually, the thumbnails have actually changed from what they were, and they now look a little bit better and a little bit more, like, quote-unquote professional, but it's me, so it's not actually professional, but, you know, pesky details. But I decided, because I was redoing thumbnails and nostalgia, that I would come back and do a full review on this locomotive. So in the coming weeks, you may see a couple other reviews on YouTube that were past locomotives that I have re-reviewed, now that my voice is lower and I'm older and I actually know what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's probably gonna be a thing. Alright, enough of this random crap about what's going on with my YouTube channel and past stuff. Let's get into the locomotive here. So this is a LEGO 8-wide model of a Pennsylvania Railroad 482 mountain-type steam locomotive, classified as an M1a, numbered 6759. Part of my inspiration for building this locomotive originally is that my dad owns a Lionel O-gauge TMCC equipped PRR M1a numbered 6759. And I love that locomotive, and I wanted one, and he doesn't let me run it, so I built my own out of Legos. So in the 2 years I've spent working on this locomotive, it's come a very long way, and I'm very proud of myself for how much I've done. For those of you who are new, regulars to my channel, or are new to it and have seen past videos, or are part of the O-gauge model railroad community, which is mainly what I'm a part of, this may look a little weird because it's Legos, and there's studs and lines where there shouldn't be, and there's no molded in pipework, and there's no separately applied, well, there's actually a lot of separately applied grab irons, but you get the idea. And then there's the LEGO model railroad community out there that may be looking at this locomotive and saying, wow, that's a really bad locomotive, or wow, that's a really good locomotive. I actually don't know. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. But yeah, let's start running down this thing and going over the features. So it's been a while since I've done one of these, so excuse my stutters and not knowing what I'm talking about. But anyway, so starting at the front here, we have the cow catcher that does not actually have a coupler in it because I could not figure out a effective way to actually put a LEGO magnetic coupler on there, nor a good way of putting on a good kind of quote-unquote scale looking coupler. So it just doesn't have a coupler on it until I can figure out some way of doing that. Right above it we have the coupler cut bar, which does have its little handles. Directly above that it has the bottom marker lights, which are in fact lighted, as you can see by the very eyesore kind of white wires that are just running down the black underside of the boiler. Above that we have the air tank, which is the outside of 4 Lego tires going through something that's about 5 1/4 studs long, so it doesn't quite fit, but I made it work somehow. Above that we have the 3D printed keystone plate that was so popular on the Pennsylvania Railroad locomotives that were used for passenger service. Um, and then we have behind it that kind of like circular top piece is actually hand painted in a gunship gray, because if you look at my older video, it was originally a really light gray and I didn't have a dark gray piece. So I just figured, rather than buying a piece or 3D printing it, because I didn't know how to do that back then, I would just, paint it. So I did. Above that, we have the other two marker lights on the front that are also illuminated and don't have as much of those white wires visible. And above that, we have the 3D printed headlight with, again, an illuminated stud on the front with that ugly white wire running down into the front of the boiler. Up on top here, starting at the front, we have the headlight again. Directly behind that, we have the, if you want to call it a dynamo, it's supposed to be a dynamo. I think it looks kind of like a dynamo. It was the best I could do. Directly behind that, we have the smokestack, and then the feed water heater. Again, you might kind of have to use your imagination with this because it's Legos, and that's kind of what they're designed for. Behind that, we have the bell, which is somehow still holding together. I don't know how that hasn't fallen apart every time I pick it up, but it hasn't, and I'm not complaining about it. Behind that, we have the sandome with these hand-cut, I think they're brass wires. They're brass or copper, I can't remember which. But they're metal, and I cut them, and I shaped them, and I wrapped them around this pin that looks kind of ugly because I didn't know how else to do it then. And I might change that eventually, but it's not going to happen right now. Going back further, we have the steam dome and the whistle, and then we have this ramp that's behind the whistles on a lot of the Pennsylvania Railroad steam locomotives. And I don't know why that ramp is there. I'm assuming it's to just deflect the steam coming out of the whistle. But I don't know why other railroads never used that, or if they did, I just haven't noticed. My apologies. But anyway, behind that we have the safety valves, and then we have the Belfair firebox that was, again, so popular on Pennsylvania Railroad steam locomotives. In fact, almost any any PRR locomotive you look at will have this type of firebox. And then we have the cab, which I will get to in a minute. So, starting on the left-hand side of the locomotive here, up at the front, or the fireman side, I guess, up at the front, we have these very nice cylinders. This is my camera's favorite part of the train. For some reason, this is where I get my highest quality pictures of the locomotive. It's not the front. I wish it was, but it's not. Anyway, we also have, down beneath, we have the pilot truck that is held together by Technic axles, basically, and it has a little stud up top to make sure that it doesn't, kind of pop off the rails. It still does. I just haven't taken it out yet, because it's adding a little bit of weight, which kind of helps. Above that, we have the start of the handrail that goes all the way down the side of the locomotive, which is made of the same wire that the wire coming off of the sandome is made from. And then we have a pipe. I don't know what the pipe does, but it's on the real thing, so it's on mine. And then we have the start of all this lovely drive gear that is all 3D printed. All of these drive rods are 3D printed. And if I remember correctly, the main drive rod that connects all four drivers took 5 attempts to print. That was fun. But the rest of the drive rods that are more complicated and are supposed to bind up easily and be very difficult to do, I got first try. So riddle me that. Anyway, underneath of the walkways going down the side, we have a bunch of other details, and I don't know what all of them are. I know those are the air pumps, and I think that's a toolbox, but I'm not entirely sure. And then we have the start of the firebox, which doesn't look horrible, but it definitely could have some work done on it. And then we have the trailing truck, which is probably the nicest part of the entire locomotive, is this trailing truck. I really like how it turned out. And then we have the side of the cab, where you can see the nice vinyl decals that read 6759, and the red trim around the window, and the window that's in the front of the cab that I can't remember exactly how I built it, but I really like how it looks. I forgot to mention whatever this thing is. I think it's the injector. I think. But yeah, that's also there. The other side of the locomotive is very similar, except the drivers are in a different position because I haven't moved the locomotive yet. And there's a couple different details underneath of the walkways, mainly air tanks. And then the walkway's obviously shaped a little different. And then we have another little detail underneath of the cab that, again, I don't know what it is. I'll figure it out someday. If you know what it is, let me know, please. That would be fantastic. Uh, and then we have this extra little wire going all the way down that's on the real thing. I don't know, again, I don't know what it does. But it's on the thing, and I figured, it looks kind of cool, so I'm going to put it on mine, so I did. Having removed the tender now from its connector, it's attached to the rear truck, we can see the inside of the cab. There is a backhead that is detailed, and then we have the engineer and fireman in their green seats, which I think is prototypical to the Pennsylvania Railroad M1s. I think they either had green seats or they had stools. I'm not sure which one. So I put in green seats because they look cool. But yeah, I really like how I did the inside. I want to put a light in here. I just need to get more lights to do it. I also want to put a light underneath of the firebox, which I can do with the same light set if I get one of the ones that I used in the front. But I have to actually get that, and I don't know when I'm actually going to get around to doing that. But yeah, that's a hopeful thing for the future. And now we're on to the tender. Starting in the front here, you probably can't see it because it's dark, and I do actually have more lighting in here than I do above my platform. I have a single ceiling fan that has 3 lights in it. So I have 2 more lights, but they're all in the same location, so it doesn't really help. But anyway, here's the front. It has a little coal in it. There's also there are doors back there. They do not open, they're just kind of detailed in. On the sides here, we have these handrails that go down to some stairs that go up to the panel or like the plate where the fireman would be from the locomotive. There isn't a drop plate. I didn't build a drop plate. I could build a drop plate, but I didn't yet. And then there's the receptor for the drawbar that comes off of the locomotive. On the sides of the trucks underneath, these are actually 2-axle trucks that are motorized, because I did not motorize the locomotive. Instead, I decided I would motorize the tender with these powered trucks from the LEGO Power Functions, and just have the tender push the locomotive. This was done mainly because I wanted to pull things with the tender when I first built it, and I built the tender before I built the locomotive, and I did not want to fiddle with trying to put a motor inside the locomotive, because I like the way it looks, but it would not look that good if I had to fit a motor in it. But anyway, so these are actually held on by a little clip that just loves to fall off. So when I'm doing running shots later, you may see these things like falling off all over the place. I've been trying to fix that for a very long time, and I just cannot fix it. It's been a problem ever since I built this 2 years ago, and I've been trying to fix it ever since, and I just haven't been able to. But these side frames are put in place to make the trucks look like they're 3-axle, which is accurate to the actual 210A 75F tenders that were behind these locomotives. Going further down on the bottom, you can see the water scoop, as well as some underside detailing that is more visible on the other side. And then we have the back truck, which again has one of those clip things that likes to fall off all the time. And then we have the rear plate with some handrails going up, and we have these marker lights, which are also illuminated. And then we have the coupler on the back, which has been heavily modified because it's the standard LEGO coupler that you would put on the back of a motorized truck, except those have buffers on them, and American steam locomotives do not have buffers. So I took a hacksaw and I cut them off, and that was my solution. On the top of the tender at the front, we have the co-load with the IR receiver sticking out of the top. We have this little ramp back here, which I'm assuming is to, I don't know, shield the back of the tender from coal that might fly off the back. I don't actually know. Going back, we have the red deck, which is not exactly prototypical. On the real M1s, there were 2 shades of red on the top of the cab versus the top of the tender. The tender, I believe, was a Tuscan red, and the top of the cab was a darker Tuscan red. LEGO doesn't make Tuscan red pieces, and I don't have Tuscan red paint. So I made them red because it looks better than brown. Anyway, in the middle of the tender here, we have I believe this is supposed to be the water hatch. But when you open it up, you can see the little button that turns on the lights on the back of the tender. and you can see the battery. And this is actually perfect because the little plug for the battery fits perfectly in this slot and plugs in, which was done completely by accident. But I'm glad it happened. And then there's the power button over there. And then on the back here we have the doghouse, which is illuminated when the tender is powered on. That's saved me a number of times from completely killing the battery when I'm running this thing and like suddenly stop running it because I have to fix the locomotive because it's broken into 1,000 pieces for some reason. And then we have the ladder going down the back. So I saved the best for last. The side of the tender has one thing on it, and that are these really nice vinyl decals that very clearly read Pennsylvania. They were a lot bigger than the prototype. Prototypes, the word Pennsylvania was very small in the tender, but I messed up the measurements. That was my bad. But I actually really like the big letters. They look really good, in my opinion. And this is a Lego model. It's not designed to be hyper realistic or anything like that, so I think it's fine. But these decals that are on both sides of the tender and the 6759 numbers that are on both sides of the cab were printed and cut out by my engineering teacher at my high school, and I cannot thank him enough for it. They look fantastic, and I'm really glad that he was able to do it for me. I tried learning, and I'm a really bad learner when it comes to those things, apparently, and I totally forget how he did it. But they look fantastic, and I cannot thank him enough for it. But yeah, they've stood the test of time. They have not come off yet, and they're bridged across like 3 different bricks. So if they were going to come off, they would have come off by now. So now we get to talk history. I know in my review of the T1 I said I don't normally do history. I really don't normally do history. I've been really bad with that recently, but I love this locomotive more than I love the T1 actually. So I'm going to do some history on it. So in 1939, the Pennsylvania Railroad needed a way to get passenger trains over the Appalachian Mountains in any amount of time, and their solution for that was just double-heading K4s on all the passenger trains. So what they needed was a more efficient solution than just throwing another locomotive on the front. So the Pennsylvania Railroad went to the drawing board and created these. The M1 class, 482 mountain-type steam locomotive that was designed for multi-purpose hauling. So they were meant to pull passenger and freight. And you can tell that they were meant to pull passenger at some point because they have the Keystone number plate on the front. The Pennsylvania Railroad put the Keystone number plate on any locomotive that was meant to, at any point in its career, pull passenger trains. For those that were meant for exclusively freight, they put the circle insignia with the golden trim. So yes, these were in fact meant to haul passenger trains at some point in their service life. I keep emphasizing that because they never really did pull passenger trains at any point in their service life. They did a couple times, but it was extremely rare. They were mainly on heavy freight duties, as they were multi-purpose locomotives with 72-inch drivers and a heck of a lot of pulling power. But yeah, so they never really did pull passenger trains. But I like it when they pull passenger trains, so I built 4 passenger cars, and I'm working on a 5th, but it's probably, if I finish the 5th, it's probably going to be the only one I use, because it's a Pennsylvania P70 passenger car, and the other ones are just kind of hodgepodge that I threw together because I wanted passenger cars. But 2 of them do have ball bearings. Anyway, back to this locomotive. It's part of the reason why I love the M1s is because they had that little, like, backstory. But there were 3 versions of the M1. The M1s, M1as, and M1bs. There were very subtle differences between the M1s and the M1as, and there were much more obvious differences between the M1as and the M1bs. The only surviving M1 is M1B 6755, which is currently on display at the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. And it's a little rundown. I really wish they would restore it. But the main difference between this, which is an M1A, and the M1s is that this has a feed water heater and has more tractive effort. And the difference between the M1As and the M1Bs is the M1Bs have more tractive effort, and the headlight and the dynamo are in different positions. And that's pretty much it. And so for some fun facts on this locomotive, the tender, which was a 210A75F tender, when fully loaded, would oftentimes weigh more than the actual locomotive. They called them coast-to-coast tenders for a reason. They held a lot of coal and a lot of water. Um, and they actually were put on some of the K4s, which are about half the size of the M1s. So if you can imagine a train that looks almost exactly like the M1, but it's probably about 60% of the size, being hooked up to this tender, looks a little weird. But they could run some long distance trains with those things, and they're my favorite type of tender because they're really big and they're really heavy and they're really long, and they have a doghouse, which I think is really cool. Now, for all you Lego enthusiasts out there who are looking at the track and being very confused, this is custom 3D printed Lego track. It was originally designed to fit together with the standard Lego track. That didn't happen. But these are all prototype turns, and then the straight tracks are brand new. I just printed that one yesterday, so they haven't actually been tested yet. So we're gonna have a little trial by fire here. Um, but these are what they look like. I painted the rails silver, um, and they have a couple issues fitting together, but overall they're not horrible. They do have to be trimmed so that the connections are flush to the end. Otherwise, they don't make a perfect circle, and it causes a lot of issues. But the main reason I wanted to make these turns is because, and you can see the letters on the bottom, that this is the 5th variant of the prototype, and this is the 26th track that was printed of the 5th variant. So, yeah. Because I marked everything, because some of them could only fit together with some of the other ones. Like the first couple generations, I say first couple, all those tracks back there, all those black curve tracks are prototypes that didn't work. Curves are hard. But now that I figured it out, the straight tracks were pretty easy. But the main reason I did it was because I didn't like the tie positions. The ties are too far apart on the standard Lego track, and I wanted ties that were closer together and more realistic. So I made my own track because I didn't want to buy it. I did buy turns. I did buy bigger turns. They're R88, and they keep falling apart on me, and I was kind of upset with that. So I'm like, okay, I want a solid turn. So these are in fact solid. They are not made of multiple pieces. This is one print, and it's pretty darn durable. So yeah, these are the tracks that it's going to be running on. So lights. To turn on the lights in the tender, to turn on the doghouse, you just turn on the battery, and the doghouse light turns on. And then if you press that little stud, the rear lights on the tender turn on, and then you can close that. And on the locomotive, I already took off the panels because the panels are a pain to do with one hand. But this button is headlights, bottom marker lights, and top marker lights. And then I'm going to go put the panels back on and do some running shots because I can't put the panels back on with one hand. Well, this will probably sum up today. So there you have it, my LEGO PRR M1a mountain type steam locomotive, numbered 6759. Let me know what you guys think of this thing in the comments. I think it's rather nice. It's 2 years in the making, so I mean, there's still a couple bugs to iron out and whatnot, but it's mostly done. Um, but yeah, I am CW Hollow 1, and have a good day, or maybe good night in your case. See ya.